In today's lesson, we're looking at types of waves. By the end, we should be able to understand the motion of longitudinal and transverse waves and how they transfer energy without transferring matter. Starting with this question, which of these is not an example of a wave? Ripples on the water surface or ripples on the sand? The answer is the ripples on the sand. It's not a wave because there's no energy being transferred. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to state examples of longitudinal and transverse waves and describe the difference between longitudinal and transverse waves. What are waves? A wave is a disturbance that carries energy from one place to another without moving matter along with it. There's two types of waves that you need to know about. Firstly, is transverse waves. If we take a look at this picture here, we have a disturbance on the lake that makes the waves spread out. This is a type of transverse wave, a water ripple, and the particles move up and down while the wave travels across the surface at right angles to each other. Another example is using a slinky. If we take a look at the source moving up and down, the slinky is going to be oscillating, which means moving up and down about a fixed position, while the direction of the energy wave is to the right. This means that the oscillation and the direction of the wave are at right angles to each other. Examples of transverse waves are electromagnetic spectrum. So this would include radio waves, microwaves, infrared, visible light, ultraviolet, X-rays and gamma. We also have water ripples and a secondary, also known as a S wave, which is produced by an earthquake. Next, we need to look at drawing and labeling a transverse wave. We can start with the top of the wave, which is called a peak, and the bottom is called a trough. Next, we can look at the length of a wave, which is called the wavelength. As you can see, if we take any point on the wave and go along until we reach the next consecutive point, that length is known as the wavelength. For example, if we start with the peak of a wave and the next consecutive peak, that length is the wavelength. Or we can start from the trough to the next consecutive trough, that length would be known as the wavelength. The next thing we need to know is about the amplitude, which is known as the height of the wave, or the maximum distance from the resting position. The resting position is this x-axis that is labeled here. It is the position at which, if the wave had no energy, it would be resting. Hence it's known as the resting position, or equilibrium. The amplitude is the height of the wave from the equilibrium to the peak, or from the equilibrium to the trough. The more energy the wave has, the greater the amplitude is going to be. The next type of wave is called a longitudinal wave. This is when the particles are vibrating parallel to the energy transfer. Sticking with our slinky example, we can vibrate the slinky left and right, and the energy transfer is also going to be parallel to this direction. We also need to label the longitudinal wave. So where the parts are really squished together, that's called the compression, and where they are stretched out is called the refraction. Examples of longitudinal waves are sound waves, ultrasound, and primary waves, also known as P waves. These are the waves that are produced by earthquakes. Let's look at some questions. Can you draw and label this diagram? Okay, let's see if you got it right. Firstly, the top is the wavelength. Now, remember, it doesn't have to be from peak to peak. It can be from any point along the wave to the next consecutive point. The trough is the bottom, the peak is the top, and the amplitude is the height of the wave from the equilibrium. Now, let's move on to the next set of questions. Give one example of a longitudinal wave. That's sound wave. You could also say ultrasound or a P wave. define what a transverse wave is. Transverse waves have oscillations, or you could say vibrations, that are perpendicular, which means 90 degrees to the energy being transferred. Explain why light does not behave like a sound wave. This is because light waves are transverse waves. These have oscillations that are perpendicular to the energy transfer. Whereas if you look at the sound waves, they are longitudinal, which means that they have oscillations that are parallel to the energy transfer.